Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well. In the previous video, we learned about one important topic, not in just in Python but in any programming language, that is operators and expression. I hope you got all the concept of operator and expression clearly. If you have any difficulty, please comment out and I'll try to solve it. Today we'll learn about one more functionality that is very important throughout all programming language, not only Python, that is functions. Okay, so let's get started. So first maybe what is function? Okay, so first we'll say what function is and why we need it. Then we'll define it and we'll just go forward. So if you want to define a function, like what is a function, you can just say it's a block of code. It's a block of code. So it's a block of code to perform specific tasks and can be reused. And second, maybe why do we need them? So to know why we need them, let me give you an example. Okay, so suppose you wanted to longest length of a word. Okay, suppose you are given a list. We have learned already on list. Suppose this is one list. Okay, then you have one empty, then you have one code, and you have one more called programmer. Now you wanted to find the longest word in it. If you see, for us it's simple to find, it's programmer, but how do you write a code for it? So suppose you want to, you'll say something like let's say we create one one variable called max length. Okay, and we'll give it -1. Why you give -1? Because we know length of a word cannot be -1. It highly can be 0, and it is 0 plus, that it needs to be greater or equal to 0. Then what we can do, we can loop over this. We can say for word in L1, if length, we know what len does. Len will print the length of that word. So for len of word is greater than max length. Okay, if it's greater than max length, then max length will change the value of max length equals to len of word. Okay, I hope you got this. So what we are doing here, first we are defining one variable called max length, and we are putting the value as -1. Why we put -1? Because we know length of a word can be 0 or greater than 0, but it cannot be -1. So that we can rectify it for the first variable in this list. Okay, then what we are doing, then we'll go in a for loop and we'll say go over all the word in the loop. If length of any word is greater than max length, for the first one, this one, right, it is 0, length is 0, so 0 is greater than -1. So this condition will become true and it will change the value of max length to that length of this word, that is 0 for the first word. Second, again it will come here, it will say this length is 4. Now 4 is greater than 0, yes, so max length will change. And at the end we can say print the max length is, and put max like this. See, this can be done using some functions in Python like max and all that, but I'm just trying to explain you why we need this function. Okay, why we need a function here. So if you run this now, Python 10, see the max length is 10. Why? Because if you see the programmer, right, you say 3, 6, 9, 10, the 10 letters in it. So along with it, let's do one more thing. Let's print what is the word also. So what is the word? So first let's put it empty, and whenever the changes length, just change the word also to word. Okay, and max length we'll say with word as word. Okay, now if you run this, see the max length is 10 with word this one. Now suppose we wanted to do it for another list called L2. So there is one more list called L2 equals to let's put here the same list, but we'll change some variables in it, this one, but there is one more called let's say programming. Now this is longer than this programmer, right? But now if you wanted to find the length, what you'll do, you need to copy this once again, right? You need to copy this once again and put it here. So you're doing the same thing. Whatever you did here, you're doing it one time, same thing once again here. So in programming, there is one thing that you don't repeat yourself. So to stop this repeating, what we do, we define this thing inside a function, and we'll use the function whenever we need it, and we'll put this as an input to that function, and that function will do some computation, that is this, and will return us this value. We don't have to do this again and again. So that is why we use functions, so that we don't repeat ourselves when we want to perform this task. as we'll go learning how we define function and this. I'll come back to this example once again. I'll come back here and we'll see how we can solve, how we can make this just a couple of lines, and we don't need to copy it every time we create a new list. We don't need to copy all of this. Okay, so that is why we use function. We just want to reduce our task and we don't want to repeat ourselves again and again when we want to do the same thing. That is why when you go to the definition of function, right, is to perform specific task. Here our specific task is to find the maximum length of the word in this list. Okay, so let's comment out this. I'll come back to this example when we know how we can define function and all that. So slowly by slowly I'll come to this function, I'll come to all these lines, and we'll know how function can solve this problem for us. Okay, now let's come to the main topic, like how do we define a function. Okay, how do you define a function? So for function there is one keyword called def. So this is the keyword that Python uses. When you use this keyword, Python understands that now you are going to define something called function, and then we write the name of the function name. So this is just like variable, you can name anything, but it's recommended that keep the name that suggests what the block of code will do. So the name here, right, whatever name you put, just put the name that will tell the user like what you are going to perform inside this function. Okay, just like variable where we say like keep the variable name similar to what the value is supposed to be. And for naming convention, use small case. And if you want to different word, right, suppose this is function, this is name, if you want to different word, use keyword, use underscore to break words. So here we want to break this function and name into two part, right? So what you use this underscore. After this, use a parenthesis. So use parenthesis, right? Then use a colon. Okay. So this is how you write the main template of how you define function. You write def, put the function name, put the parenthesis, after parenthesis put a colon, then come down. Then you need to indent. Since you know in Python we don't use curly braces, so you need to indent in tab or spaces. Then put all your whatever you wanted to do here, right? Just put it here. Suppose we wanted to print hello world. Print this is function. This is a function. Okay, we're not doing hello world, we're doing just this is a function. So this is what a definition looks like. This is what the definition of function looks like. So you write def, name of the function, parenthesis, colon, and whatever you wanted to task, put it here. And now how do you call this function? So for the function, when you run this script, right? Let's run this script. See, it does not do anything. So but function by itself cannot do anything. You need to call this function. And how do you call this? You just have to write the name of the function. Okay, you just have to write the name of the function and put the parenthesis. We'll come back to this parenthesis and what we can put inside later on, but for now you name the function, put the parenthesis. Now if you run, save this file. Now if you run this, see, you get this is a function. So by default function does not run automatically. To run a function you need to call this function in the separate part of your script. You can call anywhere, wherever you want, and this is how you call. Okay, so and this is how you can print anything or do anything that you want here. We'll come slowly by slowly, we'll come to this, like what we can do here. Now there is one more thing is this function can also return something. Like here it is not returning something, right? Suppose let's do one more thing. Let's define one more send number. Let's do return number. So what we'll do, we'll use a keyword called return, and let's return 5. So how this works is, this is a function, this is how you define a function, you know that. So this is a keyword called return. What return does is, whenever you call this function, right, this is not returning anything, but if you have a keyword called return, you can put this in a variable. So you can say variable equals return number. Now you can even print this variable. So how you assign a a value to an variable, right? When we learn about assignment, here also this return number will return you 5 and you can assign this 5 to a variable. Okay, now when you run this, let's comment out this so that you see what we are trying to do. See, we get this 5. So how this works is, it will go inside the function, then it will start doing from top to down everything. Okay, if there were anything in the print statement or anything, so let's do one more print also here. Print inside, let's write the name of the function, print inside this. Okay, now if you run this once more, okay, we did not do the indentation, so don't forget the indentation. Okay, after colon we need the indentation to know that this block is under this definition of function. Now if you run this once more, see, it prints inside return number. So you can do anything that you want inside a function, like printing something, doing some calculation, and you can also return some value. If you are returning some value, you can assign this value to a variable. If you don't want to assign, you can even print this directly. How we did print, you can print anything, right? Whenever you assign or don't assign, if you write here print return number, right, this will also work same as how you put it, assign it to a variable and print. It will do the same thing. Now when you run this, see, you get this 5. So it is similar to how if you want, you can put inside a variable, or if you want to print directly, you can print out. So that is how you use a return. So for function to be valid, return is not mandatory, but if you want this function to return something that you can have access to after computation, then you can use return. So let's do some proper functioning and see how we can use this. So let's define a function called define add. Okay, then what we'll do, we'll define two variables, x equals to 5, y equals to 10, and what we'll return is, we'll return x plus y. Okay, we'll return x plus y. Now if you call this, suppose where result equals to add, what do you think this result will pause? Result will print. So take a pause and comment what this result will, what will be printed when we run this. Let's run this and see, you get 15. Why? Because inside this function, as I said, you can do anything that you do in general, what you have learned till today, right? You can do everything inside this function. You can put variable, you can put list, dictionary, and you can return this, or you're doing some calculation, like you can do add, you can do all this bitwise operator and everything here. So that is how you do. But be careful, whatever you define inside a function, right, here x and y, you can't use them outside this function. Suppose if you do print x, let's remove this. Now if you run this, see, name x is not defined. So this is called scope. So when we come to scope, the scope means where this x can be used. So if you define any variable inside a function, right, that can be only accessed inside this function. Outside this function, it has no meaning. So if you define any variable inside a function, just know that this function cannot be accessed outside the function. So this is the scope of that variable. The scope of variable is local to that function only. You cannot print, like you cannot even print y also. If you think y will get printed, no, it won't. See, now if you run this, see, name x is not defined. If I comment out this, the error will come to y. See, name y is also not defined. So just know that these are local to this function. Local to the function, cannot be accessed outside. So this cannot be accessed outside the function. This can only be accessed, this x and y, right? This can only be accessed within the function. So this is how the scoping works. Okay. Now let's come to one very important thing, is called parameters. So here we pass this x and y inside the function. So how do we pass them from our side? Like we want to take it from the user and pass it from our side. How do you pass some variables to this function from our side so that they don't need to redefine it inside them? So that is where the parameters and arguments comes into play. Parameters in function. So what you can do, as I said, this parenthesis has some functionality. So let's say let's create one more called add. Here inside this parenthesis you can define some name, like if you want say two numbers, okay, then you can say first, second. The name can be anything like variable, okay. and here you can do return first plus second. So as you know, in Python we don't have type of this. Okay, we don't have type of what these types need to be. So whatever you send in first and second, it will try to add them. Now if you send number and string, it will fail because number and string cannot be added, right? So you need to know like what you need to know about the function, like what needs to be passed. So now what you can do is you can call this add, and you can pass two number here. If you say 5 and put a comma and put the number, I'll tell you how this get assigned. Okay, one second, let me just complete this. Print result. So how this work is, so we define a function called def add, and we put two variables inside this parenthesis. So what these two variables inside parenthesis will say that let's do one thing. Let's see how this works. So we'll call this add and we'll pass this. Okay, let's run this. I'll explain you. Okay, just one thing. See, when you don't pass anything inside this add, now in the previous we did not pass anything when we call the function, right? We put just in parenthesis. So now when we write something inside this parenthesis, right, so we are saying this function that two extra fields needs to be coming whenever you are calling this function. So if you run this without passing anything, like in the line 71, right, we did not pass anything, so it will give a type error. It will say missing two required positional argument first and second. So we need to pass two parameters to it, then only this function will run properly. So how do you pass them? You can pass directly to number. You can say 2 3, and if you run this now, let's print out. Okay, since we already did this here, so let's give me 1 second. We'll add throws error. So you know why this will throw error, because we did not pass the parameter that was asked. Like there are two optional things that this function requires inside the parenthesis. Okay, now if you run this, see, you get 11. Why? Because whatever you are passing here, right, so suppose 5 will enter inside this first. So it will depend on the position that you send. So 5 cannot go to the second and 6 cannot go to the first if you are not passing any named variable. We'll come to named variable. Just for now, whatever you are passing here, right, exactly it will enter here. So add, you added the add, you added 5 inside the parenthesis. Thus 5 will be the first and 6 will be the second. So however you write this, right, it will directly go inside this and perform this. But sometimes you want to jumble out. Suppose you want the 6, like this 6 should be part in the first and 5 should be second, but you wanted to pass 6 after you pass 5. Then you can use named variable, named parameter. So how you can do this? You can call add and you can call the name of that variable. So you know the name of the variable second, and you can pass here 6, and you can call first equals to 5. Now if you run this, see, you still get 11. How this works is, but now first you pass 6, then you passed 5, but here we are passing first 5 then 6, right? So if you are not passing with name, okay, if you are not giving the name that the function was defined with, then you need to pass however the parameter is defined in that function. Okay, but if you are giving the name, then you can put anywhere. So like first here, right, so first was in the first place, but here is in the second place, so you can pass it anywhere. So that is how parameters in function work. So parameters are like passing optional parameter that the user can pass from itself without it being defined inside the function. So this is like giving functionality, like it's spreading out the functionality so that user can use it accordingly. Okay, so earlier when we defined two variable inside this. Now you can't change this, right? But when we use parameter like this, it's up to user now. User can send 6 5, he can send 1 2 0 1, whatever the users like can send directly when calling this function, and the result will be based on what they sent. Now since you understood till now up to parameters, now let's come to the example that we are talking earlier. So let's go back to this example. So what this example was saying, like, let me uncomment this. So now you will understand this slowly by slowly. So we'll define a list. It says I'll define a list. You need to give me the longest word in it and give me what is the number of letters inside the list. And what we did, we did a for loop on the list, and we said if the length of any word inside this list is greater than max length. By default, max length will be -1, since we know -1 will not be the the length of a word. So this will always be false, and length of word will always be greater than max length for the first time. So it will change the max length to this length of word. I will keep looping over them, and whenever the max length is spent, after this loop is finished, then we run this. But now when we do the second time, we again need to do the same thing again. So do you have any idea how we can do using function? How we can make this inside one and call this again just by changing the list? If you have got the idea, pause the video and do it yourself. Okay, I'll do it now, but if you wanted to do yourself, if you understood how function works, or just go back and see once more how function works and see if you can solve it. If you can solve this, this will be the best thing you did in the last 5-10 minutes in learning function. Okay, let's do it from our side. So how do we do it? Let me comment this. Let me come back here. So let's do solving the example above. So what was the condition given to us? We'll be given a list. Let me copy this and put it here. This was the what we are using above, and there were one more list called L2. So L2. Let's paste it here. Okay. So what was the question is, there were two lists and we need to find the longest word in it along with the length of it. So what we can do now, let us define a function. Okay, we'll define a function def longest word. Okay, and what we'll do inside this function, we'll put a parameter. So we'll say word list. So you know this is parameter, so this can accept anything you send here. So we'll say that since we know the function, so we'll say this word list will be list of word. Okay, and inside this what we can do, we can just copy whatever we wrote above, right? Just copy this and put it inside this function. Let me put the indentation here. Put it inside the function. Now how this will work is, see, we did the same thing. So this was there in the above also, but it was repeating again and again. Now you don't need to repeat it. You can just call, just say longest word and put the list in it. So L1. Okay. Put the longest list and put the L1 here. If you run this, see, we get the max length is 10 with word programmer. Yes, that is correct. Now what if for the L2? Same thing can be done here. Just copy paste this. Just put L2 here and run this. See, the max length is 10 with word it says programmer once again because it did not save the file properly. Let's run it once again. So it's still printing programmer. So what do you think the problem is here? So here we know programming is longer than this programmer, right? But still it's printing programmer both of the time. Why? So take a pause and see what is the error here. There is an error, that is for sure, because in L2 it should print programming, but it's printing programmer. So this error was simply a look over. So we copied it from the above, right? So here see, the variable that the for loop is checking is still L1. So it's still checking this L1, but we don't want to check this L1, right? We want to check whatever the list the user is sending. So now it will loop over whatever the user is sending. It won't see the L1 or L2, but it will depend on whatever the user is sending as parameter. So now if you run this, see, first it says the maximum length is 10 with program. Second time it says 11 with word programming. See, so what did function achieve as for us is, we were writing this again and again, how many times the list came. But now, you don't have to write this again and again. You just need to call this function, just put the list inside this, and it's done. So just one line of code can minimize the 6th line of code. So 6th line of code is converted to one line now. So in the previous one, when I said what is the use of it, we need 6 number of lines to just print the same thing that we are doing. We earlier already did it. So this is where the use of functions comes into play. So it can be reused again and again. So how many lists you have, you just use this. Just call this function, put the list here, and it's done. You don't have to redefine it again and again. And there is also one more thing. Suppose here, okay, in the above one, you wanted to change this print statement. So the max length is you want to say maximum. Okay. Now if there were like 100 of this list, okay, what you have to do, you have to go to every print and you have to write here maximum. You have to go one by one to every one of them and you have to write from max to maximum. But when we do it using function, right, you don't have to go again and again. You just go inside the function, just change in one line, just make it here maximum, and every time you print this now, see, it will give you maximum. So this makes our life easier. Actually, using function is like you're just helping yourself also, and it's good to find also, like if there are any problem in it, right, you just have to clarify in one function, and everyone using this will be clarified in the same way. But when we do it using when we write again and again the same code, right, so to solve one problem we have to go through all that places that we copied. So that is how functions is very helpful for us. So that is why we are using function. Okay, I hope you got this. You know how parameters works. Now let's do one more thing inside this. We'll return. Here it's printing, right, but we don't want to print, we want to return this word. So what we can do is we can return. So we have already learned how tuple works. So you can put this in a tuple. So first we'll print the word. We'll send the word, then we'll send the maximum length. Okay, we learned about tuple, right? So I said tuple will be very useful when we'll return something. So this is where we can return. So suppose we want to return two things at the same time. Earlier we return only one, right? Where we say we return just the one word or one number. But what if we want to return multiple? So you can use tuple here, right? We already know tuple. If you don't know what tuple is, watch our previous videos. We have discussed how tuple works, what tuple is. So if you want to more than one element, right, just put it in a tuple and return it. Now what we can do is, we know when you send in a tuple, we can break it into two words, or you can just put it in one word. So you can say result 1, and you can say result 2, and we can just print them. Result 1 and result 2. Now if you run this, see, we'll be getting two tuple. First is programmer, that is of word 10 length, and second is programming of length 11. And if you want to unpack it, you can just unpack it. We have already learned how we can unpack from a tuple. So that was it all about how we can define a function and how we can use it. Now let's come to one more interesting thing, is called default parameters. Okay, before this, let's do one more thing. Let's comment this out. I hope you got this. So there is a problem. There is one problem here. So let's say, suppose this is a variable called x equals to 5. Okay, then we do def add 1, and here we pass a number, and what we do number plus equal 1. We have already learned this assignment. What this will do, whatever the number is, it will increase by 1 and it will let's return this number. Okay, now let's do print of, suppose this is y is equals to add 1 and put this x here. Now let's do print of x and print of y. So what do you think the value of x will be and what the value of y will be? Take a pause and just see once. We have already talked about scoping and all that, but just for now, just see what the x should print and what y should print. Okay, so it's called impact of original. So here the original value was 5 of x. Then when inside a function called a number, it increased by 1 and returned the y, and whatever was entered in this y, we have assigned it to y. So what do you think x will print and what y will print? Okay, now if you run this, see, it gives 5 and 6. X is still 5. X was 5. It entered here. It did plus equal 1. We return y. Y becomes 6, but x is still 5. So that is what you need to take care. So if the argument that is passed is mutable and immutable. So we have learned what mutable and immutable is. So mutable, like which can be changed, like list, dictionary, they can be changed, and immutable are like which cannot be changed, like number, float, integers, tuples, they cannot be changed. So if it's immutable, so So if you can write here immutable does not change. Mutable does change. So let me give an example. Here the x was still 5, right? What if x was a list? So let's do one more. X equals to 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we'll do def add 1, put the list here, and we'll do lst dot append 4. Okay, we'll append 4 and we'll return the list. Now let's do one more call lst2 list2 and equals to add 1 and put lst and put x here. Now print, let's make this y so that it becomes similar previous one. Print x, print y. Okay, now what do you think x and y will be? In the previous one both of them were same. What do you think now it will be? So the answer is in this screen only. Okay, look carefully and think about it and think what this L will be. Answer will x of y will be. Now if you run this, see both x and y are same. Why? As I said, immutable does not change. In the previous one x was immutable, just a number, but mutable does change. So here x is a list, right? And we know list is mutable and dictionary is also mutable. So when you pass a list or dictionary in a function, right, anything that happens with that list will reflect in the original also. That is why here x and y will behave same. But in the previous, when it's a number, string or tuple, this is immutable, so it will always create a copy when doing any functionality so that the original does not change. But in mutable, it won't create a copy, it will perform the same reference of this x. That is why both of the value will be same after computation. So you need to be very careful when using this. Okay, I hope you got this. Now let's come to other word called default parameters. We've already learned about parameters in a function. So whatever you pass inside the parenthesis, right, those are the parameters. Now what if you want that the user can or cannot pass? So if you want, you pass. You don't want to pass, you don't pass. Okay, so what we can do, you can say def add first and second. So the one we already learned. Okay, and what we are doing is we are returning first plus second. Okay, and now if you call this add, print add, so we are getting this error. So it was saying that missing two required position parameter first and second. So what we want to say is, even if the user don't pass, don't throw an error, because by default if the user does not pass, put it as 0 equals to 0. So this is how you can say default. So by default this numbers will be 0 for first and second. So if you want that a user, if the user want, they can pass. If the user don't want, no need to pass. We have by default we will assign 0 to this first and 0 to this second. So to assign, what you can do, just like you assign it in a variable, right? Just assign it, put an equal sign and put the number itself. So here now if you run this, it won't throw error, but it will give 0. Why? Because even if you did not pass any variable, right, it will still give you 0. Why? Because we said by default it will enter 0. If you don't pass anything, it will be 0. But if you pass, what happens? If you do print add 5, now you can pass even one parameter. So if you run this, first it will print 0, second it printed 5. Why? Because it got one number, right? So it will override this 0 with 5. So if you don't pass anything, the 0 will take place. But if you start passing some things, right, then it will take place of whatever the user is passing. So this is very helpful. So when you want that something, if the user don't pass, still it should not throw an error, then you can use this default. But inside this default also the same thing, this mutable and immutables comes into play. So inside the default, this is defined only once. So when you say first equals to 0, right, when this function is called for the first time, when it's defined for the first time, then only this gets set. So it won't set again and again. But since these are immutable, right, these numbers, strings are immutable, so these are all the copies of it. But what if by default you pass a list? Okay, so if you do def add lst equals to empty list, and you do lst dot append 1 return lst. Okay, so by default what you are doing, you are calling add, inside you are passing lst and you are passing an empty list. Now if you run this print add, again call print add, if you run this now, see it start adding up. So what happens is when you pass mutable, right, see this, when you pass the default is only defined only once. Okay, so for the first time when you create this function, at that time only this value gets set. The value is set on the definition once only once. Okay, so when you do a default, right, whenever you define a function, the value is set, it won't update again next time. When you call it once again, right, it won't put first equals to 0, because already the the Python knows that it was passed a default, so let's keep it this way only. And whatever is there, since it's immutable, we cannot change it, so we put a copy of it and do it. But when it's a list or dictionary, right, since it was created already and it's mutable, so it start changing the things in the list itself. So it will change the same list again and again. So whenever you call the number again and again, it will just keep on updating the list itself. So be careful on this when you are using this list or dictionary. Caution when adding default list or dictionary or any mutable types. So how you can avoid this is, either you can make a copy. We have learned that when you make a copy, so this will change the things. So you can put like, let me comment this. So solutions of this are, first is copy. Okay, so let me copy the same thing once again, put it here. What you can do is just put a you can put lst, put the same name if you want, put the same name, put lst dot copy, then do lst dot append of 1, run this. See, now you get 1 Why? Now because now we made a copy of it. Now it's, though the name of the variable is same, it's not up to variable name. Okay, it's the referencing of the variable. So it's all based on memory location. When you copy it, it just changes the reference of the memory location from it. Now if you append it, now it's a different list altogether. Though the name is same, it's referencing to different memory location of itself. So this is one solution. The second solution is, whenever you wanted to pass list or dictionary by default, don't pass it at direct empty list or dictionary. What you can do is, let me do this again. Use this called none. Okay, use none. Now you know when you pass none, now you need to be careful, right? You need to check if lst is none. So if it is none, then make lst equals to an empty array. Then you can do something like lst dot append 1. So this is one more way, using none as default for mutable type. So these are the two solutions. Now if you run this, see you get 1 You don't get the copy like you got before. So these are the two ways you can see when you are using mutable type like list or dictionary. Okay, this is very important. Okay, you will face problem when you do this way, right? When you pass a empty list to a function, and if you don't take care of itself, if you don't do copy or anything, and you start appending it, your original function itself, your original list itself will start changing. And if you pass by default, the default list will also change. So every time you do some functionality, all these things will start getting appended to the list, and which may not be the case that you wanted. So be careful when using default and using mutable type as the default. Okay, so that was it about default. Now let's come to one very important thing of Python, that is using args and keywords. You will see in function when you start looking some source code and anything, you'll see something like this. You'll see they'll write a function and they'll put some args, and you'll see something like qwargs, and there'll be something like print. So anything to do here, okay, anything that the user want. And or you can use pass. What does pass means when you use a function is just it's an empty function. Just don't throw any error or don't do anything. Just trying to define it later on. For now, let's keep it empty. So you'll be seeing something like this. So what this is argument. This is called arguments, and this is called keyword arguments. Like we learned in the previous, right? When we say def, and we say define a function called add, and we say first, second, and we call them, right? And we call something like add, we pass a number, or we call second equals to 5. So this is how it works. Here this one, right? This one will behave like args, and this second equals to 5 will behave like keywords argument. So this is called argument, and this is called keyword argument. So let's see an example how this is getting called. So by default, this arguments is a tuple, and this keyword argument is a dictionary. I'll show you how. So you can write print args, print keyword args. Okay, and let's do one function called def. Let's call this function func. Put 1, 2, 3. Put name equal let's code together. So now if you run this, see, for the args, right, it will print in a tuple, and for the keyword works, it will print in a dictionary. So that is how it is getting used. So why this is useful is sometimes you don't know how many arguments will get sent. Okay, sometimes you don't know, it may send any, but you wanted to use all of them. Okay, so let's do one example. I hope you got this right. Okay, this will be in the form of tuple, and this will be in the form of dictionary. So I'll see how it is getting used. Suppose we have a function called add. Let's define one more time add. Now here if you write first, second, right, first and second, first, second, so now you are blocking the user. If you write first plus second, you are blocking the user that they can send only 2 parameters, first and second. But what if you want multiple? You want to send how many you like send? I'll just add them and send you to. So that's where the args comes. AR become useful. So if you do something like this, def add args and keyword argument qrgs. Now you know this args is a tuple, right? So tuple will have a list of all this. What you can do, you can just return sum of args. Now you don't have to worry. Now when you call add, just pass as many you like. Pass as many as you like and print the value. Print and run this. It's print. Now if you run this, see, it gives 21. So now you are not blocked like how many arguments are. You can pass a list here, but suppose you don't want to pass a list, but you want to pass the argument by yourself. So now you are not blocked by adding only 2 variables. You can add multiple. Now you know this is a tuple, so it can just continue. It's the longest list. How many long you can want to make, it should make it. Similarly, like keyword arguments, like you want like suppose you want some values, okay? Keyword args, kwargs. Suppose I said when you are learning dictionary, if you don't know dictionary, look at the dictionary episode that we did. So suppose you want a variable called if they pass any name variable, can do like something like this. If kwargs, you know, we can get a variable by using get in dictionary. You can say if kwargs get 0, then return 0. So this is not this will not always be used, but suppose you wanted to get that this is a condition in whatever the function you are writing, it's a condition that or else can say something like break. So this is a variable that you are expecting, like whenever the user, if the user send any variable called breaks, what you do, you don't do the sum, you just send it 0. So now suddenly you send here something called break. If you write here brake, since break is a keyword, let's use something else. So you don't use keyword as a variable names, okay? So this will start complicating things, and some of the time Python won't allow you. So what are the keywords like def, if, return, break, continue? These are keyword, you don't use them as a variable. So you say should break. So just this is just a name, okay? So and you write should break equals to true. So now if you run this, see it printed 0. Why? Because if you pass any name variable, right, this will enter this kvrgs in the form of dictionary. Okay, let me print this so that you actually see it by yourself. Let me copy this here and print it. Okay, now if you run this, see it will pass to this is the argument, this is the keyword argument. So it will pass all the that are not named, right, that are not named will pass into the tuple, but whichever are named, this will pass in the form of dictionary. That's how you can use this get operator using this keyword. It will search for should break, it will search, yes it's true, so it will return 0. But if you pass here false, now this will do the sum. See, you get the sum of 21, and last time what you got 0, but this time we are not getting 0. So that is what args and keywords are. This will be very useful when you don't know how many parameters the user will pass, but you wanted that as many you pass, I don't care, I will take my whatever I want, I'll do the summation, I'll send the others to you. Suppose you wanted only 3, okay, but you can do a slicing in this argument. These arguments, what you can do is you just do a slicing of it. You say I want only up to the 3 numbers. I don't care how many you pass, I won't do it for you all. So yeah, I'll do it only till 6, so I'll take only 3. You may pass 100, but for me it does not matter. I'll take only the 3 of your arguments that you send, these 3 number, and I'll add the sum and send you. That is where args and keywords become very useful. So that was it about these 2 important arguments. So I hope you got this. So that was it for function. Okay, there is also one more thing. This cannot be done in simple editor like this, but is very useful. That's called documenting a function. Now since you know a function in Python, right, we don't have type, but what if you want the user should know that pass only this type, but don't pass, you cannot validate them directly, okay? So we have something in function called documentation. Not in function, we can do it in classes and all that also. We'll learn them slowly by slowly. It's called documentation. Okay, this is how you document it. Suppose we wanted to add 2 numbers. What we can do is we can write def add first and second, right? This is how we do it, and we return first plus second. Now the user can pass anything, right? They can do something like 1 and hello, do something like this, right? No one is stopping them, and they don't even know if this will fail or something. If you run this now, see this will fail because you cannot do plus between integer and string, but the user has no idea, and you did not say explicitly like it will pass something like this. What you can do is you can use property called how you can put a type. It won't stop the user from sending hello, but at least it will give you a type like it's please send integer, and this in return will give you an integer, something like this. And inside this function you can use 3 times, you can use this single quote, and you can put a documentation here. You can write something. This will not get executed, but the user can see it. So you can say takes 2 integers, takes 2 numbers, add them and send the result. Okay, so if you write this, for now in this simple editor it won't make any sense, okay, but let's go to VS Code. So this is a more modern text editor. Go to what the function. So this is the function that we wrote, right? So it's taking a time to run this. So now when you hover this over this add, okay, in any modern browser, when you hover this add, see here, we can see this number. You can see the definition of it, int. Then it will say take two numbers and add them and send the result. So now whenever you hover over this function, you'll have idea like, please don't send anything else, send number, since you are expecting a number, and we'll send you a number itself. So this is how documentation become useful when using function. So in a simple editor that we are using like this, we won't know how this is useful. But in the all the modern text editor, right, when you hover over a function, it tells you like what this function wants, what is returning. So using some documentation like this makes it very useful. Since in Python we don't have any types, so this will at least tell the user that pass whatever we want and you'll get the result, desirable result. You won't get it. Suddenly we won't throw you some error like this. So that was it about a function. Let me revise it once again from the top so that you understand a little bit more clearly. First is what a function is. So what a function is a block of code to perform specific task. So why we said specific task is because we want a function should do specific thing. You don't want to do many things in the same function. You can divide the function so that later on when you are testing, you don't confuse it, or just simple bug in one don't stop you from the other part of thing. So keep it simple, make it a little bit specific. Now how it became useful, we showed you with an example. Like if you wanted to print the maximum length of a word in a list, if you do without function, you need to repeat same thing again and again, like this for loop you are repeating every time. But using function we can overcome this. So in the later part we saw how we overcome this. And how do you define a function? Definition is simple. You write def, put the name of the function, put the name similar to what you will be using, just as a so that you have context. You don't have to read throughout to know what this function will do. And it's better to use what we say the documentation that we learned just now, right? Use the documentation to know what this function is supposed to do. And to call it, just call it. Function by itself does not do anything if you don't call them somewhere else. And you can return also, just like printing inside this. You can, if you want to return some value, you can return using the return keyword. So this is how you can return it, put inside a variable and print it, or print it directly without printing into variable. Then come to scope. Scope is what? Whatever you define inside a function, like a variable or anything, that cannot be accessed from outside. So whatever is inside the function can only be accessed inside the function. If you are returning, the return can be accessed by separate variable, but the variable that you define inside a function cannot be accessed from outside. Okay. Then we come parameters. Parameters are like if you wanted to add some extra variables. You don't want to define inside the function, but you wanted to take it from outside the function that a user will pass it. So you can pass like this. But be careful when you is expecting some variable. If you don't pass them, it will throw an error. Okay. Then you can put any variable like this, and it will just solve for you like this. Now if you want that you don't want to pass, and however you write them right inside a function, it will similarly go here. Suppose this 5 will go as first, 6 will go as second. But if you wanted to write it according to you, you can use named parameter, where you write name of the parameter that was defined in the function and put the variable after putting an equal symbol. So then we solve the above problem using function and made it in a just of 8 lines instead of repeating it to multiple like 12 to 13 lines. Okay. Then so this was the part of it only. Then it comes to impact of original. So in a parameter, when we take a variable from outside the function and put it inside a function, if it's immutable, there is no impact of it. So whenever you do here print x will still stay 5, but y will become the one that you summed it. But if it's immutable, like the list or dictionary, even if it's outside and you just append it inside a function, it will still impact the original one, and here x will be same as what y is. Since it's immutable, and mutable change inside the function also changes the original. Then comes if you what happens like in the previous when we added two values, right? If you don't pass them, it throws error. So to overcome this, you can use default variable. What default variable does is, if you don't pass any variable, that will be taken as default. Like here first, if you don't pass anything in the first parameter, second parameter, by default it will be a 0. But if you pass, it will just override the 0 with the parameter that you pass. But be cautious when using mutable type. So in the default, right, that gets executed only once. So whenever you are defining a function, that time only Python will take care of this default to initialize it. It won't initialize again and again later on. So if you do for list and dictionary, it will start impacting. So if you append it, right, in the number of time you call this function, it will just work on the same list. And if you call this, you'll see that number getting appending again and again in the same list, and this will impact. And later on, when you don't want a function should rewrite this default value to something else. If you want always to be empty, there are some solution. You can use copy like this, or you can use none when you are passing some mutable type. Okay, then comes our arguments, args and keywords. So args and keywords are some little bit advanced type. This will come in the later part when you don't know how many arguments or keyword argument that the user will pass. Then you can use args and keywordgs. By default, args is type of tuple and keywordgs is type of dictionary. So how this works is, if you come here, we did here. So if you want to pass multiple parameters, if you want to pass multiple numbers in it, then you can use args. This args will fall in the tuple. Then you can do something like sum array and this. And if you want a particular part of it, you can do a slicing and all this. And if you want it to be named, this name will be part of dictionary. So you can use dictionary parameters like get and all that. Then come to the last one, that is called documentation. Documentation are just helping the user that are using your function by providing them a guide of what is the data type, what will this function be doing and all this. This won't be helpful in small editor like this or Notepad, but when using a modern text editor, this will be shown up when you hover over the function. So yeah, that was it. Now let's push it to GitHub. Let's see what is the update, git status. Okay, git add all, git commit functions, and let's do git push origin man. Let's see if it pens to GitHub. So yeah, you can see here we have functions and we have all the things that we'll learn today. So I guess yeah, that was it for today. Function is very useful. Go through it again. You may face difficulties. There is no shame in that, because function is little bit hard for the when you come as a beginner, right? Function is a little hard to understand, but you need to know what functions is. Okay, they are very useful. And we have used function in the previous also, like we have used length, we have used get and all that. Those are also function. So you need to know how we define a function and all that. If you have any difficulties, put in the comment. I'll try to solve them. So yeah, that was it for today. I'll see you in the next.